Hi fellows, we're back again to read chapter 10 of A Tale of Two Cities, The Secret Paper, which is the title of this chapter. If this is the first chapter of this series that you're watching, know that there are 9 other chapters coming before this chapter that you need to watch to reach this video. So you can start watching from chapter 1 from the link above. Do you remember what happened in the previous chapter? Miss Pross ran into his long-lost brother Solomon Pross, now faking his identity as a Frenchman. Solomon Pross is working as a spy in conciergerie, but his secret is found out by Sidney Cartoon. Now Sidney Cartoon pushes him to do something for himself, or maybe for themselves, to save Charles Dickens. And Solomon Pross, or his British identity bastard, agrees to cooperate. Now let's start reading the next chapter. And after that, Sidney Cartoon bought some powders and we don't know what he's up to. When Charles Dickens was led before the tribunal the next morning, Dr. Manette, Lucie and Mr. Lorry were all there. The love in Lucie's eyes as she looked at her husband warmed Darnay's heart. It had the same effect on Sidney Cartoon, though no one saw him standing at the back of the room. 2 people who love Lucie. It was the same tribunal who had let Darnay go free on the day before. But revolution laws were not as powerful as the anger of the people. The president of the tribunal asked, means the head of the tribunal, maybe the judge who was older or had more experience. Who has accused Charles Everymond again? We know that Madame Defarge and Monsieur Defarge has accused him, and a third person, whose identity was not revealed in the previous chapters. 3 voices, he was told. He's accused by Arash Defarge, by Teresa Defarge, his wife, and by Alexander Manette, doctor. How can it be? There was a great noise in the room when Dr. Manette's name was heard. When the shouting stopped, Dr. Manette stood, pale and trembling. President, this cannot be true. You know that the man who is accused, Charles Dickens, is my daughter's husband. My daughter and those who are dear to her are far more important to me than my life. Where is the liar who says that I accuse my daughter's husband? Dr. Manette has always spoken for Charles Dickens and not against him. This is the scenery of the trial. We see the tribunal here, Charles Dickens here, and Dr. Manette apparently is speaking for Dickens. Where is the liar who says that I accuse my daughter's husband? And the middle one might be the president of the tribunal. Citizen Manette, said the president, be calm. Nothing can be more important to a good citizen than the freedom of France. Defarge came forward to answer questions. He told how he had been at the Bastille at the beginning of the revolution, when that hated prison had been taken by the citizen. Yes, remember how they staged an uprising and how they took the prison and they went to the North Tower. 105, they searched Dr. Manette's room. Defarge talking. I know that Dr. Manette had been kept in a room known as 105. North Tower. It was the only name he had when he came to me in 1775. I went to the room and, hidden in a hole, I found a written paper it is in Dr. Manette's writing. I was positive that I had found something in that prison cell. Read it to us, said the president, and the crowd fell silent and listened. What does it mean to fall silent? Means to stop talking, cease talking, and listening. Fall silent, to stop talking. Now we are reading Dr. Manette's letter, found in his cell in a hole. I, Alexander Manette, write this in the Bastille in 1767. I have been here for 10 long years, and I write this in my secret moments, when I can. One evening in December 1757, I was walking by the river Seine, and a coach stopped beside me. 2 men got out, and one asked me if I was Dr. Manette. When I replied that I was, they asked me to go with them, and made it clear that I could not refuse. Make it clear. Make it impossible for someone to be any doubt about. Make it impossible for Dr. Manette to be any doubt about. So he couldn't refuse. He couldn't say no to what they said, to what they asked. So 2 men accosted Dr. Manette, approached him, and asked him to follow them to get on the coach. The coach left Paris and stopped at a lonely house. I could hear cries coming from a room upstairs. When I went in, Dr. Manette let us, I saw a young woman lying on a bed. She was young and very beautiful. She was also very ill. She kept crying out, "My husband, my father, and my brother." Then she listened for a moment and began once again, "My husband, my father, and my brother." I gave the girl something to make her calmer, but her feverish screams continued. Feverish. Feverish screams means screams with fever. Feverish means characteristics of a fever. Having fever. Showing symptoms of fever. Showing symptoms of fever. So feverish screams with symptoms of fever. But her feverish screams continued despite all the things that Dr. Manette did to her. Then I returned to question the 2 men. They were clearly brothers. They were similar in appearance. And the clothes and voices implied that they were noblemen. But they took care to prevent me from learning their names. Apparently they had done something terrible to the poor girl. Before I could speak, the older brother said carelessly, "There is another patient in a different room." They showed me a boy of about 17. There was a good sword wound in his chest, and I could see at once that he was dying. "How did this happen?" I asked. "He is just a crazy young peasant." Peasant means a poor smallholder, like a farmer, a poor small farmer, an ordinary small, non-important villager. It's the opposite of nobleman. Peasants are ordinary poor people of a village or a city society. He came here shouting about revenge and made my brother fight him. The older brother's voice was cold and hard. He seemed to think the boy was less important than a horse or a dog. The boy's eyes looked at me. "Have you seen her, sister?" You see, this boy is the brother to the girl that Dr. Manette met in another room. It was hard for him to speak. "I have seen her," I replied. "So a brother and a sister are the victims of these cruel noblemen?" "These rich nobles are cruel to us, doctor. They destroyed our land. They take our food. They steal our sisters. My sister loved a man in our village. He was sick, but she married him to take care of him. But my sister is beautiful. The nobleman's brother saw her and wanted her. They made her husband work night and day without stopping, until he dropped dead where he stood. Then they took my sister away. When my father heard what had happened, the news was too much for his poor heart and died suddenly. I took my younger sister to a place where she is safe and came here to find this man. He threw some money at me, tried to buy me like a dog, but I made him pull his sword and fight me to save his life." Well, his story is a very sad story. The boy's life was going fast, but he cried, "Lift me, doctor." He turned his face towards the older brother. "Marquise," he said loudly. "Oh, these are Donna's uncles. Am I right?" "I call for you and your brother and all your family. They're Darnay's fathers and uncle, now and in the future, to pay for what you have done." Then he fell back, dead. The young woman's fever continued, but I could not save her. She lived for several more days, and once the Marquise said to me, "How long these peasants take to die?" When she was dead, the brothers warned me to keep silent, to stay silent. They offered me money, but I refused. I refused it, and was taken back to my home. Now I see Dr. Manette wrote something against the Marquis family, and now his letter is speaking against Donna on the trial. The next day I decided to write to the king's officials. The king is deaf to the plight of people. I knew that nobles who did unlawful things, unlawful means against law, things that are against law, were usually not punished, and I expected that nothing would happen, but I did not realize the danger for myself. Just as I had finished writing my letter, a lady came to see me. She said she was the wife of the Marquis of Evremonde, and she had discovered what her husband and his brother had done. This lady might be Charles Donay's mother. She wanted to help the younger sister of the girl who had died. So she has a younger sister, good, and asked me where she could find her. Sadly, I did not know and so could not tell her. But that was how I learnt the brother's name. The wife of the Marquise was a good, kind woman, deeply unhappy in her marriage. She had brought her son, apparently Donnay, with her, a boy about 3 years old. So Dr. Manette had met Donnay before he was taken to prison. "If I cannot find this poor girl," she said, "I shall tell my son to continue the search after my death. You will remember that, little Charles, won't you?" The child answered, "Yes." Later that day, I sent my letter to the king's officials, and that night there was a knock at my door. My servant, a boy called Ernest Defarge. Ernest Defarge was Dr. Manette's servant? Brought in a stranger. So this is how Defarge and Manette know each other from the beginning. Who asked me to come at once to visit a sick man in the next street. Okay. As soon as I was outside the house, several men took hold of me, seized me, took hold of me violently. The Yavrimont brothers came out of the darkness, and the Marquis took my letter out of his pocket, showed it to me, and burned it. Not a word was spoken. Then I was brought here to this prison, my living grave. In Manette's letter, Charles is only a child. He is not guilty of anything. I have been here for 10 long years. I do not know if my dear wife is alive or dead. These brothers have sent me no news of my family. There is no goodness in their cruel hearts. I, Alexandre Manette, in my pain and sadness, I condemn them in the face of God. Condemn Marquis and his brother, not Charles Dickens. When Defarge had finished reading, a terrible sound rose from the crowd, a long wild cry of anger and revenge. Death for the hated Marquis of Yavrimont, enemy of the people! The trial was over, and in less than 24 hours, Charles Dickens would go to the guillotine. Charles Dickens was only 3 years old when this violent crime happened. Fall silent, stop talking, cease talking. Make it clear, make it impossible for someone that there is any doubt. Suggest, show, imply. Feverish, with fever, with symptoms of fever. Peasant, an ordinary villager, smallholder like a farmer, small farmer. Unlawful, against law. Take hold of someone, seize someone, take someone, capture someone. And this is the end of chapter 10. They are going to send Charles Dickens to guillotine, execute him in less than 24 hours.